Good afternoon and welcome to the May 6th regular meeting of council. The city of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. Start off here, we have the consent agenda. We have the minutes of the council meeting held April 15th, 2024, the minutes of the special council meeting held April 29th, 2024, and the approval of the council meeting agenda. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations as noted? Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Gore. Any errors, permissions, or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries. Thank you. Now, the delegation here, and it would be, we have one presentation today from MNP LLP, audited financial statements for the year ending December 31, 2023, a presentation by C. Vanderhoost, MNP LLP, of the city's audited financial statements for the year ended December 31, 2023. Corey, you're already there. You got the red button already figured out?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You've been here before, haven't you?
Yes.
Thank you. Corey, welcome.
Thank you. And thank you to the council for inviting me here to present today. It's going to get the presentation up here. Perfect. So before I start, a big thank you to the finance staff, Jetta and Marley, and staff throughout the city for helping us go through the audit process this year. It goes very smoothly. We really appreciate all their assistance. Thank you. I'll take over and drive now. There we are. So I've got a quick presentation here this afternoon, take you through some financial statement highlights, talk a little bit about the audit process. Did meet with the audit committee last week, had a nice fulsome discussion of the audit process, and really appreciate the audit committee's time last week. So starting in on the balance sheet or the statement of financial position, this is a snapshot of what was in the city's accounts at the end of 2023. You can see there that cash and investment balances have increased to $81.6 million. A large chunk of that being put into investments to make sure you're earning a good rate of return with some of the interest rates being high at the moment. If you add the receivables and some other financial assets in, you get the total financial asset balance of $88.6 million. Debt being paid down on schedule by the city is down to $4.9 million. And debt and payables and other liabilities total 33.4 at the end of the year. If you subtract the total liabilities from the total financial assets, you get what we call the net financial asset position, and that's the $55.1 million. So that's sort of the liquid position at the end of the year. Then you get the physical assets, the infrastructure, roads, buildings, water system, sewer that you're managing. And that's what we call the tangible capital assets. And that's $215.8 million at the end of the year. That is the historic cost of those assets, the cost to acquire or to construct those assets over the entire length of that the city has existed. So that's not a replacement cost value. And then the accumulated surplus at the end of the statement is $271 million. I'll get into what's in that number in a future slide. Important to note this year, I talked about it last year with the presentation, is there's a new liability recorded in your financial statements, what we call the asset retirement obligation. So looking at all the assets that you manage, looking at any of them that would have any sort of remediation or cleanup that needs to happen, you know, the asbestos in the walls, that type of thing. So the liability isn't huge in the grand scheme of things for what the city manages, but it's a $505,000 liability calculated at the end of 2023. $171,000 for wells and well closure, and just over $330,000 for asbestos, lead, other hazardous materials in buildings that the city is managing. This liability, this amount will change year over year. If there's regulation changes, we might have new liabilities come on. If there's cost estimates that change around how much it costs to cap and close a well or to clean up asbestos, you'll see this number change. So I wouldn't expect it to be stay at that flat 505. Can go up, can go down every year. On the income statement or the statement of operations, Total revenues for the year were $47 million, up from the prior year's 43 and up over budget. A couple significant items in there that result in that increase in budget. One is investment income with the increase in rates. There's a significant increase in investment income. The second one is what we call donated assets. So as some of the development around town finishes up, as a subdivision or a building finishes, the developer donates the road, water, sewer, sidewalk to the city to manage. So there's some significant donated assets that were received in 2023. Both of those items, the donated assets and the investment earnings, are not budgeted for or not at the level that they come in. So that's why you see that increase from budget. On the expense side of things, $32.3 million of expenses, up from the prior year, as you'd expect with what we see in inflation in costs and wages, but also important to note below the budgeted expenses for the year. So an accounting surplus of $14.7 million. And I say accounting surplus because we put a lot of adjustments in there as we're coming up with that number. To unwind some of those accounting adjustments, I like to look at the cash flow statement, what actually happened in your main bank account. So there's $15.5 million of net cash inflow from operations. That includes, you can see the significant increase there year over year from 11 million to 15.4. The investment income that I already mentioned earlier, in addition, the Growing Communities Fund that was received from the province in the spring causes that increase in regular operating cash flow coming in. Your capital project spent $7.4 million on physical assets throughout the year. You've moved $12.6 million into investments out of the cash account to make sure you're getting a good rate of return. And you paid $200,000 down on debt. So the main bank accounts decreased $4.7 million at the end of the year. Most of that decrease being into the investments to make sure you're getting some good interest income. The $271 million of accumulated surplus that I promised I would explain, working from the bottom up, the $210 million number, that is what we call the equity in the tangible capital assets. That's that book value minus the debt. That's the biggest part of that $271 million. Then you've got some unrestricted surplus, 34.9, and you've got restricted surplus and reserves of $25.9 million. Switching gears out of the numbers and into the audit and the audit results, we're happy to be providing an unmodified opinion again this year. That's a clean opinion. We're satisfied that the financial statements that you have in your package are prepared in all material respects in accordance with public sector accounting standards. The last step in our audit process is council approval here today. When we're doing our audit process, we start by looking at the controls in place, the city, making sure that you're getting accurate financial reporting. Then we sample transactions. We don't look at everything. We're getting ourselves comfort over the big transactions and sampling on the smaller level transactions. And again, a big thank you to staff for going through the audit process with us this year. I will confirm our independence. We didn't do any other projects or any other work with the city that would impair my ability to give you an independent audit opinion from January 1, 2023, all the way through to today. And I'll wrap up with 2 slides on financial analysis. So we started by looking at just 2023 and a little bit of comparison to 2022. But I like to look at what are the trends over the say last 3 to 5 years in some key ratios. The first one we talk about is what we call the sustainability ratio. So this is comparing your financial assets to your liabilities. You have more assets than liabilities, or do you have more liabilities than assets? The magic number here is 1. If you're over 1, you've got cash and investments set aside to pay for future projects. If you get below that 1, you end up with you're taxing or raising revenues in the future to pay for the past. So you can see the trend there from 2.25 in 2021 up to 2.65. So that's showing that long range planning, that putting some funds aside for some of the projects that you know will be coming down the pipeline, and it increasing to the 2.65 mark. Then the flip of that, how much funds are available conversation is what we call the flexibility, or sometimes I like to call this one the inflexibility ratio. This is looking at your infrastructure and your capital assets, the things that you're managing and keeping up to keep that quality of life up in the city. And we look at what's the rough aging of those assets. So this does not bring into account condition assessments or when you're going to do the replacement work, but just how old are the assets in general. You know, as the assets get older, more costs are in climbing on annual costs and those replacement costs can get up. So what you can see here is this ratio is actually declining for the last 5 years. So it was 74% in 2019. It was holding for a couple of years and down to about 70.5%. So there's some aging assets, aging pieces of the infrastructure. I know there's a lot of, you know, almost 7.5 million spent this year, but you can see there's going to be more assets coming that are aging about roughly 1% a year for the last few years. So that's something to factor into those conversations around asset management and asset replacement and that long-term financial planning. And I think that's the last slide. If I could get my, there we go. Yes, thank you. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are some.
Thanks very much, Corey. Any questions from council here or comments at this time? Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Corey, for the presentation and for the meeting that we had. Was that just last week? I did have one question regarding assets to liabilities. You mentioned that, you know, anything less than one, you know, could be of some concern. Is there an ideal ratio?
Thank you, Councilor Beal. It's a good question. Yeah, there's no magic number for what's ideal. A lot of the communities that we work with are in that between 2 and 3 range. Like you see, you're at 2.65. That's having that long range planning in place, looking at is there a big capital expenditure coming in 2, 3, 4 years that might end into that. And then, you know, we do sort of red flag it when communities start to get into that really low or into that negative position. Some communities can get into a net debt position. Often if there's a large capital project that had to have a significant amount of debt behind it, you can get there. But that's not a bad thing. That means you did a big something, right? It's all got to be tied into that asset management plan and that long range plan. And as you're building towards a larger project or something that's coming up, you would want to see that number growing, right? So if it was getting from 2.65 to 3 to 3.5, but you had something coming year 5, that is still prudent financial planning in my mind. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, council? None. It's okay. Thank you very much, Corey, for your presentation. While this is fresh in our mind, I'd like to ask for a mover and seconder for the recommendations as noted, please. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Hold on, Councillor Martin. I'll get you down. Councillor Gore.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thanks, Corey. Question for you about the unrestricted surplus. And I see that it has grown significantly compared to last year. And if my math is right, looking at the slides, I think we had an additional 14 million added to our unrestricted surplus. And I also see the asset retirement obligations and trying to keep the assets, capital assets in working order. As you know, City of Parksville does designate 0.5% of our taxes towards capital assets, like we have a reserve for that. Since a question for you, just for my knowledge, since our unrestricted surplus has grown significantly, can we as council, let's say next year, give the people of Parksville a little break and not have that 5.5% contribution of the taxes? Like, just trying to think here for next year.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. It's a great question. The answer is it depends. It depends on what your plans are. I mean, it sounds like a broken record. I go back to that capital, the infrastructure idea of what's coming down the pipeline. I think it's very important to understand the asset management plan and the long range planning of those projects. If in the asset management plan and the long range plan that can be figured out, then that can be figured out. But that's something for staff to work through with you as they go through. Not something, you know, the trick of the audit is we're looking backwards at 2023 instead of forwards. But I think your staff's doing a lot of work on the asset management plan, the long range financial planning, and that's the key.
Good. Any further questions? Thank you. I'll ask for a mover or seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Counselor Wood. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. We have one delegation today from the ENN Railway Division of Canadian Railway Historical Association regarding the railway water tower. We have a presentation today by Mr. Peak of the ENN Railway Division of the Canadian Railway Historical Association regarding the railway water tower. Welcome, Mr. Peak. Come up to the microphone. There's a little button second from the right. If you push on the red light, it'll come on your microphone, sir. You got it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and Mayor and Council, it is my pleasure to be here this afternoon on behalf of our organization.
I believe your light just went off, Mr. Peak. Yeah, just accidentally.
Touch
There
it.
you are. You're back.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Touching too many things here.
Right.
I should know better. And Mr. Mayor and Council, I really do appreciate the opportunity to make this presentation. I'll try to make it very concise. I will say this, my background is 15 years in local government in the town of Lake Cowichan and all the rest of the associated organizations. So I have that in my background as well as a whole bunch of railway stuff. In any case, we're here to talk about the water tower project. And before I speak to our proposal, I would like to just, first of all, apologize on behalf of the organization for this delay that's gotten us to this point in time when, and we all have reasons why it didn't happen, but that's water under the bridge, so to speak. But the primary issue from our perspective is the restoration, preservation, and retention of railway artifacts pertaining to the ENN Railway. And this water tower is a significant component of those artifacts, structures, buildings, rolling stock, et cetera. The ENN Historical Association is dedicated to this preservation of many pieces of equipment, and we do have a substantial amount of our own artifacts, mostly stored in Victoria, with a few pieces of rolling stock still in the hands of previous owners who have given them to us, and we have to move them here. So our primary goal is to restore and retain this physical asset in its original form, if we can return it to that. So having said that, let me move to the actual details of what we would like to propose. And the $17,500 that you folks gave us away back in 2021 is sitting in trust in our accounts. We have been very careful to make sure that stays separate from all of our other funds. And we as a group have changed a little bit, even in the couple of years since 2021. We have many more members than we once had, although some of our very key members who lived here in Parksville, unfortunately, have either passed away or moved away. And so there will be an issue around that. But in this case, we would like to propose that the ENN Group continue to manage this project using the funds that you have currently given to us, plus additional funds that were promised to us. And we would then handle all of the managing of the folks that would work on the project, and we would also handle the outlay of cash required to purchase truck rentals or crane rentals, et cetera, like that. And that's where we're going to have to go. We need to see a little bit of an increase, but we can talk about that one-on-one if you see this project moving forward. Previously, crane time, we had been told by the crane operator owner here in Parksville that he would donate his time and equipment, and that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So we're probably going to have to pay him for his services. If we carry on with the proposal as we've talked about it, and that would be to restore it in its current location rather than moving it to the railway property, because none of us knows what the future of the railway is, then it would be less cost for crane work, primarily to lift the tank off of its base structure so we can fix the base structure and then put the tank back together again with new material, new slats up and down on the side, and then replace or fill in a rubber lining inside that would allow it to be actually used as a water tower again somewhere down the road. That's because we're dreaming in Technicolor and think that if the railway's restored, part of that would be tourist trains on the site. And I happen to be part of the Discovery Center in Duncan, which owns a steam locomotive that is fully functional, could run on these tracks, and we would like to see a tourist train similar to what you see in Skagway, Alaska on this railway. Your area is a key component of a tourist rail. Anyhow, that's a separate issue. The other component that's caused us a little bit of trouble is the fact that our membership has changed, and most of our new members came to us in Victoria. They're very interested in this railway and its future as well as its history. And we don't have the bodies up here that we used to have. And so what we're suggesting to you is if you could assist us in gathering some individuals or an interested group, one of the service clubs in the area might be willing to work with us and give us some of that physical labor that we're going to need as part of this whole operation. I'm not sure how we would find those people, but I think you folks would probably have some good ideas. I have a couple. And that would make a great deal of assistance to us getting this project done. And in addition to that, the ENN group is prepared to inspect the tower every year and to note any maintenance that might be required as time goes by, as wood structures always do. And then we would come to you with a proposal for whatever was necessary. So between the two groups, City of Parksville and our ENN group, we can manage the maintenance as well as the initial reconstruction. Now, if none of that works, we do have a rather way out in left field second option that we could share with you. Most of our artifacts, rolling stock, and everything else that we own as an organization sits in Victoria right now on the developer's site called the Roundhouse. And that developer, of course, is responsible and will be restoring all of those buildings on site. The turntable that used to roll the equipment around still functions. We use it ourselves. We have about 5 pieces of rolling stock there. One of them is a baggage car set up as a display unit. And we have a bunch of the little, no, I've lost the name, the little carts that they used to inspect the tracks with. We have 3 or 4 of those that we've restored. So we do have a lot of equipment there. And so one suggestion, an option might be for us to take the tower apart, transport it to Victoria, and put it back together and restore it in the Victoria site, which would add to the collection of railway artifacts there. In a perfect world, I think here's the better location, but we always need to look at what other options there are out there. I don't know if I want to talk anymore. I think it might be better if I answered any questions that you folks might have for me.
All right, thank you, Mr. Peak. I appreciate you coming back, and there's a couple familiar faces from the previous council that we approved the last process, and we're still here. So nice to see you back again.
I'm glad to be back. I'm glad I'm still around. It's been a few years, and I'm not the youngster I was once, but I still keep involved in all of this stuff, and I'm happy to make sure that my lobbying for the restoration of the railway takes a lot of my time too. And I work with Larry Stevenson from the ICF because I was the original chair of that board and put together that proposal and that transfer of asset. So.
Well, we certainly appreciate your commitment to the cause anyways regarding the railway division. I just have a couple of questions up front, then I'll open it up for the rest of the council here. We're talking about the restoration of the existing tower, and you're suggesting that you're going to use your crane to lift the water tank off and put it back down and replace the posts and so forth. How does the slab, the footings, do they look like they need to be replaced as well? That bears the entire weight of that structure?
No, your concrete slab is in perfect condition, and even the structural supports that are underneath are in very good condition. One of our members is an engineer who has experience in that regard, and we've done an inspection of it by all of our members many times over and are satisfied that other than a couple of minor fixes to the support structure, and one of them would be to lift up the support structure and put some protection underneath to prevent moisture from sucking up into those beams and supports, because that's part of what would destroy that in due course. We're not exactly sure what it would be yet, but that would be part of the repairs. When we take the top off and set it on the ground, then probably 50% of the slats will need to be replaced. So we have to get some certain kind of wood and have it cut to size to do that. But that would all be done with that component on the ground beside the support structure. But most of it's in much better shape than we had imagined.
So what I'm hearing is that there'll be no excavation involved. There will be no.
Not at all. That
No earth movement
no,
necessary.
that concrete piece is
Okay.
just fine.
Okay, that's good. That's takes care of one concern I had. The other mention of the consideration to turning this area like with the tourist train with some of your rolling stock. You suggested somewhere down the future, the corridor foundation, the Island Corridor Foundation, has you know, many proposals that they're trying to work their way through on, and I understand that that process is a long and arduous process. But at the same time, are you suggesting that in the meantime, until they get say trains moving back and forth Vancouver Island, that you would be prepared to set up a just a tourist train in the area that just to be active on the spur we have here and use the siding at the train station to store at? Is that something I'm trying to justify, you know, having the water tower here, or as you said, with the secondary thought about having it in Victoria, you know, to preserve it. So
All of that is items that have been discussed. We have received proposals from various corporations, and we ourselves have looked at an opportunity. And I'd have to say none of it's written in stone right now, but it is certainly options that are sitting on the table waiting to be considered and could be done. I understand there is a very positive move afoot over in Port Alberni to get all of their train operations back in place. And there's been $50,000 put forward through 3 or 4 different groups to fund a study that brings them to the point of knowing what they need to do. And so City of Port Alberni and the local Heritage Association, the ICE-T organization, those folks are all behind it. And there's another great opportunity for a tourist train running in from Port Alberni to Parksville, one of the best sites on the island for rail tours.
okay, but that's good information as well. I'm just I'm concerned about putting good money into a water tower that's here, although Parksville has a shortage of historical buildings. And so I hate to see another one disappear from our area. And so I think it's worth fighting for anyways, especially with the thought that it could possibly be part of a bigger picture,
Mhm.
you know, with collaboration with perhaps Port Alberni to run something in between.
Sure.
It would be worthwhile that we had the tower. You mentioned the fact that the tower itself would actually have the liner replaced on it, so you're actually using it. So because I understand it from some of the previous builders on it that perhaps the tower is just just structural and it's not actually functional as a water tower right now. There's no liner inside it.
It could be functional.
It could be.
It's not very difficult to bring it back to
Right.
full function. If you've noticed on the outside that there are bands of steel that go around it. And I heard a story from somebody the other day that I couldn't help but laugh. The bands start fairly close together at the bottom and then they go further apart as you head to the top of the tank. And somebody with, I thought, fairly high level of intelligence said, oh, well, those bands are slipping down, so there's a problem. The fact of the matter is they're close together at the bottom because that's where the bulk of the weight is
That's
that
right.
keeps the water in. So somebody didn't quite understand the structure. We actually have original set of drawings for that tank, so we know exactly where it was, how it was built from square one.
Thank you. That's interesting. You actually asked for a need for more volunteers. Before you got some volunteers to assist with this, is it a no-go if you don't get some volunteers? I'm just letting you know that it's difficult in this post-pandemic world to find volunteers. They have
Well,
evaporated, it appears.
it's,
So it's difficult is all I'm saying.
it's going to be more difficult
Right.
if we can't find some local volunteers. There is one gentleman here who was actually part of the original restoration before that it was restored, and he's still here. And that man has a great deal of knowledge. We just need to add some more bodies to his experience.
Okay, thank you for that. And yes, and so you mentioned that there's a possibility that this could be moved down to Victoria to be used at their the roundhouse down.
Yeah,
From
and-
Victoria, I'm familiar with. the
And it would
area.
become part of a very large display of a variety of equipment. And I think it would have the same sort of opportunities to be maintained and restored as it would here. It's just a matter of, do you folks want it here or do you want to let it go?
So as I understand, the tower itself would be the property of the city of Parksville, but who would carry liability insurance on that? Would that be your association or?
If it's down in Victoria, it depends
Oh,
whether.
no, sorry, I'm.
Oh, here?
Here.
Oh, here. We carry liability insurance for working on any projects on the rail corridor.
Yes,
The liability relative to it sitting there would need to be part of your
Okay.
insurance.
thank you. Okay. That's all the questions I had written down. Councilor Martin, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Peak, you were saying you would like us to share the cost of maintenance. Is there any idea approximately what the cost might be? Do you have any? I know we've gone over some of the costs or things that are okay.
Okay, let's look at where we started from, and you folks back a few years ago put together got a report on what it would take to demolish that tank. And the report indicated $35,000.
Mhm.
So when we proposed initially that we would handle the restoration of it, we asked if we could have that $35,000, which would have been put into tearing it down. So you gave us $17,500, which we're still holding in trust. And that additional 17.5 would be needed to finish the job. Each year, you're not going to see hardly anything for a while. Because once we put it back together with all new material where necessary, it's going to continue to be fine the way it is. But down the road away, there might be a $5,000 bill here or there, or a $10,000, depending on what deterioration has happened. But if we maintain it on a yearly basis and replace every small problem that occurs, the cost itself should be pretty minimal.
Are you good, Councilor Martin? Okay, thank you. Councilor Gore?
Thanks, Mayor. Mr. Peak, thank you for the presentation. We just had our accountants presenting on the liabilities and the asset retirement obligations. And I will give you what my thoughts are on the two options that you presented. I personally feel that fiscally it makes sense for us to send it off to Victoria. Just because there are a lot of unknowns at this time. Who will be responsible for the maintenance insurance? And I think a lot of those obligations in the end will fall on the city, and the staff resources, as we already know, are quite stretched. My question to you, sir, is what is your anticipated cost for the movement of this tower and the water storage tanks over to Victoria?
I have not done any research to identify that exact cost. To be honest with you, I'm throwing it out as an option, and we talked to the organization as a possibility, but our preference is to keep it here because you already have the railway station here, which is an artifact which will remain in your community for a long time. And to have the tower here as well fits very nicely with the station. And let's think long-term. When the Island Corridor Foundation and we created that board and created the opportunity to take ownership of this railway, when the board members sat around the table, one of the things we said was, this is a visionary. Let's not talk 10, 15, 20 years. Let's talk 50 years. And artifacts from the history of Vancouver Island and the railway and many other things, if you look at Europe, for instance, they maintain their artifacts and their historical buildings, and they keep them for all kinds of good reasons. And one is your history is important to you, and it should be. So I'm suggesting that the best case scenario is here. We'd probably use all of the $35,000 to take it to Victoria. That's just a guess off the top of my head, but I think that's pretty close. But at this point in time, I'm encouraging you to think about the long-term future and restoration and maintenance of artifacts that are important to Vancouver Island.
You? Councilor Beal?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to our delegation. Thank you very much for coming today and for explaining in quite a bit of detail what would be involved with the various options. And I do note that we have it in our agenda further down with a staff report and like. one question I do have is, from what you were saying, it sounds like you might not need the full $35,000, even if everything goes well, if it's restored and stayed here, or that at the very least, you're not likely to need any additional funds from what was anticipated prior. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, because of a change in the circumstances where we once had the donation of a crane and we don't have that anymore, we're still uncertain as to what our extra cost might be over the 17.5 we already have. And there are two things that will play into our cost. The one is this crane that will be required both to lift the top off and put it on the ground and then put it back again. In addition to that, that material and those specifically staves that are on the tank, they are a custom cut and we need the right kind of wood. And so that is going to be a cost too. And you know what wood material costs these days. So I'm reluctant to say that we can do it within 35, but until I get some actual cost estimates of that, which we will do if you folks give us the go ahead, we'll get crane costs and those material costs as quickly as we can.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that. That's, helpful. Obviously a bit of an unknown, but nonetheless, helpful. And, perhaps there's another crane operator out there who's.
You never know.
this.
We get somebody who's interested in these things and they're ready to help us.
That's right. There are also some amazing organizations locally who will raise money or donate for worthy causes, and also a number of individuals who I actually do think that if it stays here would want to come out and volunteer, only because, or largely because, it's a specific project. And in my experience, you can get people to come out for a hands-on specific project. And then it's not like they're being asked to, volunteer forever.
yeah.
I must say, I do appreciate if I'm up that way on the island or up in Coombs or on the West Coast coming into Parksville, and then you see the water tower and the train station. And as our mayor mentioned, we don't have a lot of historical buildings and artifacts in the area. We've got the Rod and Gun, we've got the Macmillan Art Center, former school, we've got the museum at the other end of town, and of course, coming in, it's the water tower and the railway station. And those are things that I do think are very important for any community, to have those links to the past. So I'd like to see us be able to do this, but we'll see how things go.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Peak, for the presentation. Question on rail infrastructure. If Port Alberni did get their end together, how much would it cost? Do you know a more recent cost of getting that rail usable between Port and Parksville?
Sadly, I don't. I mean, if I was talking just replacing rail corridor with ties and track and ballast, that's one thing. But I can tell you right now that the bridges between here and Port Alberni, the mud sills have slipped, and so a lot of your wooden structure is now sliding out of place. Now, on the other hand, those little wooden trestles that went across all those creeks and streams on the side hill there, that's easily replaced with one unit bridges that you just take out the structures there. And my son-in-law works for SureSpan, and they build those specific kind of things that they just bring the whole section in and drop it in place. The track would already be on it and you're ready to go. And so that's an easy fix. Does cost money, but I think as far as tourist travel is concerned, that train trip from Qualicum, Parksville over to Port Alberni is to me, it's equivalent of any time I've ridden the train in Skagway, which I've done 3 times. And tourist trains draw a lot of people from around the world.
Follow up, Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a good answer, Mr. Peak. I don't think any of us want to see the water tower or the train station here go away. I rode from Toronto to Calgary and back with my grandma when I was 7 on Via Rail. Train has an important, I work for Canadian Pacific Hotels. Train has an important history in this country. But what I see is how expensive infrastructure is. And I find it easy to look to Europe they have a lot older infrastructure and they keep it up and it's beautiful, but they have larger populations with smaller countries. And how I look at things is we are ranked 238th for population density in the world. And so we have a very big country with a very small population, and everything gets more expensive with infrastructure, food, and everything. And so I kind of take that into account when we're talking about getting the rail back up and running and just spending money in general. I just feel like we're running such a large country with a small population that everything can get very expensive very quickly. One last question I have for you though is if it did go to Victoria, say Parksville, say the train did get back up and running and the water tower from Parksville is in Victoria, would there be a chance that we'd be able to bring it back up here and somehow and then put it back where it was just in case? I don't know how many years in the future it might take for the train to be running, but I just wanted to see if I could get you to, say that there's a chance that we might be able to get it back if it did go to Victoria. Thanks.
I would say that chance would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 80-20 in favor of Victoria.
Okay, sure.
The developer down there is willing to spend substantial sums of money on the railway artifacts. And anything that he gets his hands on, he's not about to
Sure.
let go again. And I, for one, I don't have a problem with that because he's the kind of a guy who sees the railway as a very key component, both of his development. He's prepared to do all what's necessary on his property to service a commuter service in from Langford. And this rail corridor, one thing that everybody has to keep in mind, has the ability to be a fourfold operation. Commuter service from Langford to Victoria,
Mhm.
intercity service right up to Courtney.
Mhm.
Freight, there's all
Mhm.
kinds of opportunities for freight and tourist rail. And the tourist and freight are your revenue sources to assist with the passenger service.
Mm.
So do me a favor, and I understand your few of the things, but even though we're a country with a large area and small population, I think we still owe it to ourselves and to our future families and members of this country to preserve as much of our history as possible.
Mhm.
If we don't do that, then I think we're letting it go to waste and not doing ourselves justice.
Thank you.
Sorry, don't mean to criticize,
No.
just a personal point of view.
Of course.
Thank you, Mr. Peak. And further to those comments, I appreciate the romantic notion of the railway and the historical value and so forth. But I'm just thinking in my head on, there's so many maybes that are all the way down the line. And to preserve this existing water tower, I would suggest that if a couple of those maybes came to fruition and we were able to run rolling stock or a tourist train, I believe that we could probably build a new water tower, to today's standards with today's materials, brand new materials. Maybe we can even use those same footings. But anyhow, I'm kind of the opinion that there's so many maybes that are out there. I'm reluctant. I'm very familiar with the Victoria, the Roundhouse development. It's a huge development. Very deep pockets, as you have indicated as well, on that development as well, because it involves so many moving pieces and so many different municipalities, as Councillor Wood has mentioned anyways, about the densification of that area has increased to the point where now, they've talked about it for the last 40 years, that now is actually viable because they have that densification. We all know what's happening out in the West Hills and so forth, and perhaps now having that community train brought back in. And so it would be great to have some historical value on that site. So I can see it totally. What I see right here is we have to make a decision pretty quick, because as we've been advised by our staff, the existing water tower here is a liability. It's going to fail, and we're not prepared to have that liability. That's why we looked into the demolition of it, simply to protect it from falling and actually causing any damage to persons or property. So we have to figure this out, and we have to figure it out quickly, because we thought we had 3 years ago to avoid the demolition your team brought through the proposal. That didn't happen, but at the same time, in that 3 years, we know costs have not gone down.
No.
In fact, the other way is, huge. And so I'm a little concerned about that aspect of it now. In my mind, I really want it down off those structure posts quickly and to just assume, and then what happens when it's down on the ground, whether it's disassembled and moved to somewhere else or rebuilt and put back up again. I think we're going to have to take a hard look at what we want to do with that. But part of it is we have to take that liability issue off the responsibility of the city of Parksville. And the only way to do that quickly is to get it off that those piers and the posts anyways to get it down. So we're one way or the other, we're going to have to make a decision quickly. But I really appreciate your candidness and obviously your fondness for the railway system. I get it. And yeah, I'm a big fan as well. So I would like to thank you very much for your presentation. And as has been noted by Councillor Beal, anyways, is coming up later on under Section E, coming through under reports, I believe. And so we'll be discussing it today.
Sure. May I wait one last comment?
Absolutely.
I write a lot of letters to the paper in support of the railway, and somebody in the Duncan area wrote one here recently and referred to me as a romanticist. And I want to assure each one of you that I spent 15 years of my early life working for railways, then working for trucking companies and putting together the Island Corridor Foundation. This is not a romantic view. This is a preservation of a very valuable asset. And I would appreciate this council taking it on as that particular idea. This railway could bring so much to Vancouver Island, and the tourist component is a key part of it.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your
I
comment,
appreciate
sir.
you allowing me my candor, because not
Yeah.
everybody would do that.
Candor is always welcome. We appreciate honesty. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, council. And as noted anyways, this will come up later on in the agenda. Now we have our first report is regarding the Director of Community Planning and Building follow-ups reports for a development variance permit at 133 McMillan Street South to consider issuance of a development variance permit. This is, as we know in the background information, this is regarding the locating a greenhouse building on the property at 133 McMillan. So I would like to ask if there's anyone in the gallery that would like to provide a comment to council on the proposed development variance permit application at 133 McMillan. This is for the location of the greenhouse adjacent to 133 McMillan Street Art Gallery. None in the audience. Thank you. Do I have a mover and seconder, council, for the recommendations as noted? Moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Gore. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That carries. Thank you so much. Next report is also from the Director of Community Planning and Building regarding a development permit application at 860 Gajan Street to consider issuance of a development permit. Do I have, you have all the background information, council. Do I have a mover or seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Wood moves, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any further discussion? Councillor Gore.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Mr. Russell, if he's online.
I believe.
He is online, but
He's
not.
online. Okay, perfect.
Okay, there we go. Go ahead, Councillor Gore.
Yes, thanks. So just going through the background information, there was a protected tree on the property with eagle nest on it. What is the proposal? Is it to start construction after July 31st and preserve that tree? Or the proposal is to take down the tree once the breeding season is over? That's after July 31st.
Certainly, if I may, Mayor, through to Councillor Grenz. So the tree is being proposed to be retained intact. No tree is, sorry, Councillor Gore, I apologize. The tree is being proposed to be retained. It's not being proposed to be removed. And basically no activity can occur on the property until we have something in writing from a professional biologist confirming that the eagles are no longer using the nest. That is expected to occur sometime towards the end of August or early September. And then once we have that letter from the biologist, then the city would be able to issue a building permit. But until that time, they can't do anything.
Does that satisfy your question, Councillor Gore? Thank you. Yes, I noted the mention of the Eagle Trust on it being left intact in our background information. So I'm pleased with that information. Any other questions for Mr. Russell while he is in front of us here? Okay, any further discussion regarding this issue? All those in favor? Thank you. That carries a note to Councillor Grenz. I can now see him, so he is voted affirmative. Welcome, Councillor Grenz. Thank you. That is carried. Thank you. The next report on the agenda is from the Manager of Finance regarding the 2023 Annual Development Cost Charges Report to provide development cost charges activity details for 2023. Yeah, Council, you have that report in front of you. I'd like a mover and a seconder for the recommendations, if I could get one from Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Grenz. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. The next report on the agenda is the Phil St. Luke Standing Committee final report. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that the recommendation as noted that the memorandum from D. Tardif for AFRAS on behalf of the Phil St. Luke Standing Committee dated April 13th, 2024 be received? That Standing Committee report is in your package. Ask for Councillor Fraz to provide comment further, if he may, at this time. Thank you, Councillor Fraz.
Yeah, thank you. So as the letter mentions here, we've wrapped up now for the standing committee. The fundraising is still going to continue on till Canada Day is the date that we had proposed initially. So that's just happening through public effort right now. And there's been an online poll established to shift the focus as a statute isn't going to be viable to do. But since there's been money raised and people still want to, we're going to have still a memorial out there, some kind of project going forward. There's an online polling option going on, keeping it very much still community driven as to what's going to happen. And it looks like there could be a potential for a couple things to take place out of it. I think something worthy of noting as well is it came to our attention that Phil's grave was an unmarked grave, doesn't have a headstone for it. So some of the money has been allocated now to put a headstone out there as their family went by to go visit the grave site and couldn't find it. So now anyone going to visit it will be able to locate it. So that was done through the churches there as well. We'll also hear back from them once the community poll is done as to what the community is looking for. And then, they'll come to us to give us an update on it and if they seek our approval for anything that they might need. So that's that.
Thank you. If I may ask, Councillor Fraz, do you know the location of the gravesite? Which church or cemetery Phil is interred at?
St. Anne's.
St. Anne's. Okay, that's great. That's
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Edmonds.
that's great. So at this time, it's unmarked.
The gravestone was money was purchased for it about a week and a half ago. So
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure what the time frame is on getting
Okay.
a headstone placed there, but
But it's at St. Anne's.
Yeah.
Okay, good information. And let me express also on behalf of council, our appreciation to yourself and the committee for all the hard work you put into this. I know you've had a lot of meetings. We established a standing committee on it, and I know that there was a lot of very good discussion and many people very passionate about this. And so thank you for your efforts and for those from council that were also on that standing committee and the volunteers as well that continue to work on this. So appreciation from the city of Parksville.
and I'll just extend a huge thanks as well to Deb Tardif. She put in a tremendous amount of work on this, with having the staff help for this and organizing the space and doing the minutes and helping guide it. She did a tremendous effort. So
Great.
Big thanks to her as well.
Thank you for those comments as well, Councillor Fraz. Do I have a mover, a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by. Councillor Fraz, do you want to do this? Yeah. Okay, moved by Councillor Fraz, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. That carries unanimous. The next report on the agenda today, we have, as we mentioned previously anyways, the water tower. We have the corporate officer report regarding the railway water tower options, to provide council with options regarding the railway water tower. To get this on the floor, I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Gore, seconded by Councillor Beal. Discussion. Regarding this, we have in our package options, as was mentioned anyways during the presentations. We have the options identified, and so the mover and seconder, I should have asked, are you proposing the one option or the other? Or, well, it's on the floor right now. Let's have the discussion. Go ahead. Yeah, for your comments, Councillor Gore. Sure.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Peak for his enthusiasm and all the hard work that his team does in preserving the artifacts. I love history myself, and if we can preserve this, it would be great. But looking at the financial implications, liabilities, and everything, I personally feel that the City of Parksville should dispose this asset, and I would love for it to be moved to Victoria for preservation. And previously, a few years ago, the council had already planned on demolition of this, and so I just want to build on that. I don't think we should try and something totally different here, where we know the staff capacity and everything. We know the financial implications of all this, lots of unknowns, like we said, Mr. Mayor, previously. I would love to preserve this, but I think it comes at a lot of cost and uncertainties at this time. And it's way past its best by date. I'm guessing that's why the staff recommended years ago for it to be demolished. So I would propose at this time, unless other council members have anything else to say, that if we can get a option 3, where we can direct staff to work with Mr. Peak in the possible relocation of this tower over to Victoria and get a cost estimate if we can, unless other members have other options to
Okay,
propose.
So what we have on the floor right now is just to receive the report at this particular time. So yes, so let's, if we can have other council members discuss this further before we go to the next resolution, or is there any other comments you'd like to do at this time? Or do you want to put a resolution forward?
Well, I realize that I just need some clarification, first of all, that if we're motion to receive
Yes, that's what we're
at this
just
point
doing
in
right
time.
now, but yeah.
So, and then
Yeah.
we could move to
Yes,
additional options. I would appreciate that.
yes,
but-
yes. So it's just discussing the motion to receive right at this particular time. Is there any other further comments on motion to receive? Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. I
Okay.
think probably the most fiscally responsible option would be what Councillor Gore has recommended. Be really nice if we could go and visit our water tower in Victoria and it's all renewed. Part of my heart would kind of die if we just demolished it here. I don't know what the financial implications are of having it moved to Victoria. But I just don't see the train coming through anytime soon. And so I think that would probably be what I would lean towards as an option. Thanks.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the suggestion that the train might be running or that something might be happening in the future, one day, 1 year, in some respects, I think is totally beside the point. And I think that even if at the end of the day, the railway area becomes a trail, a more active transportation route, part of the Canada Trail, whatever it is, I think that even then, having the water tower there becomes a real destination point for people along the trail. Personally, I would like to support having this organization get involved with looking after the work that needs to be done and us giving the $35,000 that's already been identified towards the project so that it could stay here. That actually sounds like would be a lot less money than them taking it down and moving it to Victoria. And that's certainly what I would like to support for many, many reasons, and certainly keeping some of Parksville's history here in Parksville.
Councillor Grens.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the presentation earlier there to the delegation.
If you could, Councillor Grens, if you could maybe lean into your microphone a little bit if you can. We're going to adjust the volume here at our end. You're very, very muffled at this point. We're working at it here. Just give me a test 1, 2, 3.
Checking 1, 2, 3.
There you go, loud and clear. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, great. Yeah, I'm grateful for the presentation earlier from our delegation. I did take the opportunity to read up on the history of this water tower a bit. I actually didn't know that much about it, even though I see it nearly every day. And I note that twice now it's escaped the wrecking ball. So my question, since this has been before the previous council, is maybe through the current council members who were on that council or staff, whether there was any formal or informal community feedback on the future of this water tower received at the time of the 2020 decision, and if that's anything that could be taken into consideration as we consider this today.
Yeah, I'm looking at our CAO right now as we were on the council, Councillor Fraz and myself. At the time, it was that the public was not really overly involved with preserving the historical features of this tower. It was more of a opportunity that was presented itself merely for the fact that we were prepared to spend $35,000 to have it demolished, and then the group came to us and said, well, instead of doing that, if you gave us the $35,000, we'd like to rebuild it and actually relocate it closer. It was what the terms and conditions at that time. So we thought, well, with dollars for dollars, that would be a good deal. We're not going to spend any more, any less, but we're going to end up with the tower being moved. What we heard today was a slightly different version of that. The tower would not be moved to a different location to save costs of using the crane truck anyways to move it down closer to the station. They would be located at the same time to keep the cost down. But we also heard a couple of different things is that it was going to cost more than the $35,000. Recognize that they are sitting on a deposit of, I believe, $17,000 and change anyways that is held at trust. But part of that $35,000 is already there. But it was indicated, I heard today, asked enough questions, that there's going to be a request probably for further funding to make this happen. That's going to exceed the $35,000. And there was some indication that they would not be willing, even though they built it, to assume the liability, so that then the liability costs for the insurance would fall onto the city of Parksville as well. I'm a little concerned too when I heard about the annual maintenance on it as well. Now it just becomes another serviceable asset that was going to be done in conjunction or cooperation with the city of Parksville. That put a little fear into my heart because we already have enough of that already, as our staff is already well used anyways for every day of the year. So that was the concerns where we're at as compared to where we were last time. Councillor Grens, as I recall, the CAO is not nodding or waving any red flags at me, so I think I've captured it. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, that does. I just wanted to get a feel for, certainly this has not been anything I've ever heard from any members of the community about, and so I wanted to get any information that we may have about the community interest in maintaining this asset within the city of Parksville.
Thank you. No, I'll just have a comment and then I'll get over to me. My personal feeling on this after hearing the presentation today is that we ask the group that has approached us anyways regarding the water tower is to Mr. Peak's organization is if they would be willing for the same price, the $35,000 to proceed with deconstructing the water tower and then getting it ready for, say, shipment to the other location in Victoria, at which cost all transportation costs would be provided by the receiver of that. So the FOB point for that would be Parksville Station, and then any further costs from that would be from Parksville to Victoria would be borne by the developer of the rail. I think they call it the rail yard. A roundhouse, yeah, roundhouse development in Victoria. So there'd be no costs for freight. They're getting a water tower on the back of a flat deck, and they just have to put it back together once it gets down to Victoria. So that would be my preference, not costing any more. We already know we had a cost of $35,000 for the city of Parksville to demolish it. I'm not sure if that's still a valid number. I can't see it being valid because nothing else has remained static for 3 years. So, but that's my own personal preference is to actually remove it and send it down because of, as Councillor Gore has mentioned, there's just too many unknowns for my comfort level at this point. But so that's where I'm at right now. Councillor Beal, further.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Probably some questions through to our CAO. Certainly the mention of concerns about liability costs were mentioned, and presumably that's already covered right now. But so my questions are, just as we have other facilities, for instance, the theater in the park, and so that's an additional cost, but we do go ahead and do these things regardless. So my question is, it anticipated that if this structure was renovated or restored, would there be additional liability costs over what we experience at present? And then I have a follow-up question.
CAO Kaler, if you could, please.
Thank you. Through you to council, we had anticipated that the liability would actually be assumed by the society. So we were hoping when we first started the conversation that we would essentially lease it, for want of a better word, like dispose of it. So initially it was actually supposed to be moved off city property. So it was nothing to do with us. We were basically disposing of the asset. In our discussions for the report, we had anticipated that we would essentially pass liability and insurance and all of those costs, including annual maintenance, inspection, to the operator, basically. So we have not anticipated assuming those costs for the city, and it wouldn't really be included. It would like increase our overall amount. So when we add new assets, we get like an updated insurance invoice and updated liability ratings and things like that. So it would be an additional cost. We do pay a fair amount for all those things we already have, but it would certainly be an incremental addition to keep it and assume those responsibilities ourselves.
Go ahead, Councillor Bill.
All right, thank you. I do take it that somehow it's included in assets presently in the city regardless, or?
If I may, I don't believe it's like expressly included in our list of assets. We had, as the report says, in 2020, we had actually proposed to remove it because it wasn't considered something that we could prevent some of the liability that was sort of somewhat imminent given the state of the building.
And my other question is regarding maintenance. If I understand that the organization, the rail organization, would look after yearly inspection and minor upkeep, that sort of thing. And is this something that we could conceivably put into a contract with an organization as has been suggested?
If I may, through the mayor, so for something like this, we would hire an engineer usually. So it would be a direct cost and an indirect cost in terms of our staff having to manage that interaction with the professional. We don't have like a structural engineer on staff that could just inspect this as part of a rotation. So what we did the last time was contract an engineering company to assess the state of the structure and provide recommendations. And at that time, nobody had come forward for quite a while. So council had made the decision to basically demolish and get rid of the structure. And at the last minute, this group came forward. So it wasn't like there was a lot of interest. I don't recall receiving any emails at the staff level. And I just confirmed that with the corporate officer that she didn't recall that either. So we were basically moving forward from a staff perspective to remove it from our property. And it probably was on our property well before we were a city. So we inherited that structure.
Councillor Dorn? Well, go ahead. I'll come back to Councillor Beal. Yeah.
Yeah, just Mayor, thanks. I'll just make a quick comment. Like, I know yourself and Councillor Beal mentioned, we don't have a lot of historical sites or structures in Parksville, but the ones we have are being managed by the societies, the nonprofit groups. And for this one, I think a lot of those responsibilities, just the way I see it, falls on the city of Parksville. So I still stand by what I was initially proposing, that it be moved to Victoria, I think would be the best option for us.
Councillor Beal, go ahead.
Thank you. And in somewhat related vein, I guess what I was thinking about other areas where we do have organizations that look after city assets, if you like. But could it be leased to this organization so that although it's on, for instance, the museum is on city land, and does that mean that the city has to have city personnel, or that we contract someone to come and inspect the museum, or that does the museum society look after that as part of their lease? I'm just wondering if it's similarly, there may be other areas where something is on city or using city property, whether it be the baseball or others. So
Do you want me to try and answer that?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I just would say that we don't own any of the buildings on the museum property. We just own the land and lease it to them. And similarly, there are some other situations where when the lease expires, the operator has to return it to the normal condition that we had given it to them. So they may have to remove a building or remove structures and basically rehabilitate the site. So I'm not aware of, I mean, technically, I suppose you could lease it, but I'm not aware of us doing that for any other structure. We do lease land, and we have operators for facilities that we own, but I don't think we lease any structure to anybody that I can think of. No.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wonder if Mr. Peak, if he knew we would leave it here, but they would take on responsibility for insurance and liability, if that might change, because he did say the people in Victoria do have deep pockets, and it is a historical piece. So that's just a thought. I mean, he didn't mention that. He mentioned that, no, he would expect the city to do that. But when we're looking at then removing it and sending it to Victoria, I wonder if is it possible to make a motion in that regard, or with a change?
Well,
Because
I
don't
believe
know.
I asked the question already, Councillor Martin, and
I know
asked,
you did.
you know, who would assume it, and he did say, however, we might assume the liability if the threat is it's going to disappear. He did not say that, so I'm only
Okay,
going to go on the
okay,
fact
I'm
that-
just bringing food for thought here, that's
Yeah,
all. Thank you very much.
I get it.
Yeah.
Councillor.
Thanks. If I may,
T.A. O'Kaler.
through the mayor, just our discussions at the staff level indicated to us that they're not interested in leasing it. Like what they proposed and what I think we heard them say today is that they want to restore it, and they'll do that for maybe around the 35,000, but probably more. And then the city is to assume the other responsibilities, is our understanding of what they're asking for. So we would have to keep the insurance and the liability and the maintenance. And then I think they offered also to do some of the inspections, but we would have to determine if they have certified people that can do that. because we may need to supplement the inspection, just given that it's public property and yeah. So our understanding is they're not asking for a lease, and they're basically, they don't want to take on some of that additional cost, or they're unable, because things have changed for them, so.
Go ahead, Councilor Bill.
Thank you. I understand that there might be some minor work that would need to be on it. Do we know, sort of two-part question, do we know how old it is at present? And if it was restored, how long would it be expected to last?
If I may, through the mayor, I have no idea how old it is, but I know that we're experiencing a lot of vandalism. And so I think the biggest risk that I could say is people have already tried to damage it over the years. But if we assume the liability, then there is going to be a cost, whether it's repairs every 5 to 10 years and again, listening to the speaker today, you need a specialized person. We don't have those people on staff. So we're looking at getting an engineer and maybe a specialized carpenter or somebody to do that. And so if the society isn't able to do that, we would have to put a plan in place to identify the full costs and add it to our asset management list and do the assessments and add it to our liability insurance and our maintenance roster, I guess. So we would have to do a plan to figure out exactly what the cost would be. But our initial assessment of 25,000 was because of some of the materials, and you can't just put them in the normal landfill. And we weren't envisioning keeping it as part of our assets. So we'd have to go back to the drawing board on that to figure out if that's possible.
Okay, thank you. We've had a pretty good discussion on this. I'm going to, unless council has a desire to move into committee of the whole for further discussion on just receiving this, but I'd like to call the question on receiving this right now. We've already have it moved and seconded. All those in favor of receiving the report? That is carries unanimous. Thank you. Anyone like to put through a motion? Councillor Gore at this time.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I think, yeah, my question previously was about security and vandalism in that part of the city as well. So I think I will make a motion that council direct staff to have this structure possibly moved to Victoria and work with what's the name of the organization here? Sorry.
We will need some more definitive direction from council. One option might be to defer the decision and then direct staff to investigate whether moving it would cost more than the 35,000. So we could do that or an alternate motion to just have staff look into the costs and then not make a decision on the final outcome at that point, because we could certainly follow up and ask if we allocated the 35,000, could they move it for that rather than us deferring?
Because what we heard was the developer down in Victoria would be willing to pay for the move. Okay. So yeah, if council can direct staff to provide a cost estimate on the possible move of the structure to Victoria and report back to council.
And could we include in that, if we could, Councillor Gore, could we say and ask staff to contact the ENN gang,
Yes.
so to speak, anyways, to see if they're interested in the deconstruction of that in preparation for the move?
Yeah, I concur.
Yes. Oh, is that okay?
Thank you.
That's fine. I'll second that motion. Okay, any further discussion on the motion, council? Councillor Fraz.
Could staff read us the motion they have?
Yeah, so I'm just, if I may, through the mayor, I'm just writing it right now. I might have to finesse the wording, but that staff be directed to investigate the relocating of the tower to Victoria and costs associated with the move, and see if whatever the group is named would be interested in facilitating deconstruction and relocation. Is that okay?
Okay, and Councillor Grens.
I'm supportive of not making a decision today and allowing staff to provide some more information. However, I will note that the estimate to deconstruct, rehabilitate, and move the water tower was around $320,000. according to the website, the Esquimalt and Nanaimo Division website.
So thank you for that information. I would hope that the staff would be able to get that information as well and present that to council, and whether it's the transport costs, who would be bearing those costs as compared to just the costs of deconstructing. I think that's two separate questions that staff can determine. Well, are they interested in deconstructing? And are they get it ready to be shipping ready? I think at this particular point, and that would be shipping ready to send it down to Victoria at somebody else's cost. So, yeah, does that work with? I think CAO, would that be like just taking the shipping portion out of it? Like that's not even a consideration for us, because that would be outrageous. And at this time, it's just, are they interested in doing the deconstructing type of thing in preparation for shipping to a different location?
Yeah, so I believe, if I may, through the mayor, my understanding is that council has committed to the $35,000 in funding, and we would be reaching out to them to see if, to the group that was presented here today, to see if they'd be willing to facilitate getting the tower down and out of here to Victoria for that amount. Is
Yes.
kind of what I'm hearing. Yeah,
Ready to be shipped to Victoria.
sure.
Yes. Councilor Braz, does that satisfy your question? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion, council? Hey, Councilor Beal.
Yes, thank you I'd just like to thank you for the motion, and because my concern, first of all, was that I think this will be more expensive than than doing the work on site.
Councilor Grants.
I just make one more note, is that I sense there's a reluctance on the part of council to support the continued upkeep of this asset. But I think if we were to have a bit of a timeline in place for allowing other parties to step in, so it's kind of clear out there that we're allowing for this a window of opportunity for any interested parties to get involved and take over this asset, that we are open to that.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Good point, Councilor Grants. I agree 100%. The only, I feel that the ENN rail gang, have first right of refusal in this particular case, and especially in light of the fact they're sitting on a $17,000 deposit right now, and which I'm sure they've made incredible interest on in the last 3 years. Maybe that was the strategy all along. So here we go. That's great. Is that okay, CEO? Okay, we're good to go. All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thanks, council. Moving on to bylaws, we have the 5-year financial plan amendment bylaw 2024 to 2028, number 1590. Amendments to the 2024 to 2028 financial plan. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carries unanimous. Thank you. Final adoption for the tax rates bylaw 2024, number 1591, regarding the 2024 property tax rates. Do I have a mover or seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Gore. I thought you were waving your hand anyways. I really did. That is great. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. Final adoption for sanitary and storm sewerage system amendment bylaw 2024, number 1319.21, regarding the 2024 sewer user rates. Go to a mover and seconder for the recommendation. Don't be shy. Are your hands getting heavy here? Councillor Grans, moved by, seconded by Councillor Wood. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carries unanimous. Thank you. Final adoption for the water service system amendment bylaw 2024, number 1320, 5.33 regarding the 2024 water user rates. Do I mover and seconder for the recommendations? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Let's just wait, Councillor Martin. Okay, all those in favor, that carries unanimous. Thank you. Final adoption for sewer parcel tax amendment bylaw 2024, number 1493.11 regarding 2024 sewer parcel tax rates. Moving or seconder for the recommendations. Moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Gore. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Carries unanimous. Final adoption, water parcel tax amendment bylaw 2024, number 1494.9 regarding the 2024 water parcel tax rates. Do I have a mover seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Grenz. Discussion? All those in favor? Councillor, thank you. Carries unanimous. Thank you. Got that out of the way. Are there any notices of motion? None. Seeing none, I'm going to move on now to the liaison reports. Liaison reports, if in the interest of efficiency, I would ask the council members keep their updates concise. Councillor Beal, you just name them off as they come. You can start off with your Early Learning and Childhood Council of Oceanside, if you wish.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Mayor, and I will allow for any questions anybody might have at the end of each section, but thank you. So first of all, yes, the Early Learning and Childcare Coalition Oceanside, ELCO as it's known, the $10 a day childcare plan was expanded this year with 930 spaces added province-wide. Unfortunately, though, no $10 a day spaces were received in Parksville or in the Oceanside area. The BGCCVI did apply. I do not know if any other local childcare providers did apply. I don't know that information. Other Central Island communities have been successful with applications, including Nanaimo, Duncan, Port Alberni, Comox and Courtney, and Campbell River. In fact, BGCCVI, for those who don't know, I'm talking about the Boys and Girls Club Central Vancouver Island, was selected for 2 sites in Nanaimo. ELCO did send a letter to the $10 a day childcare BC team advocating for access to $10 a day in Oceanside. And I understand that our mayor also sent a letter to the minister on the topic. ELCO received a reply outlining the criteria used as well as priorities for selection. So we didn't get anything this year in the area, but perhaps next year. We don't yet know what the date is for application for the coming year. That window hasn't opened. And I have a meeting coming up later this week. Any questions about that at this time? Nope.
Yes, thank you for that, Councillor Beal. And yes, I did send a letter out anyways expressing our support for it. We received a reply back similar to what ALCO did regarding the reasons and so forth and the from that organization. I also received a response from MLA Adam Walker anyways, so who's following up with this as well, and we're ongoing. We're attempting now to work with BGC anyways to see if there's any further steps that they can take or we can take, assist of, to make sure that they actually qualify for it, maybe a little sooner than waiting for the next intake. We'll be meeting with the executive director, Karen Cloud, as soon as we can set that time up anyways. And so, yeah, just to see if it was all about numbers, you know, the age group numbers and so forth is explained in my reply. So yeah, we're going to carry on and we're going to try and advocate for them. Yeah, that's awesome. And thank you for your work on that.
Thank you. And as a note, Karen Love with the BGC is in fact a member also of ELCO. So, you know, we're part of a larger coalition and a whole range of childcare providers can apply, although the priority is for those offering 0 to 5, i.e. preschool. So anyway, hopefully next year. Chamber of Commerce. I attended a meeting of the Board of the Chamber of Commerce last week, and I was able to share some information regarding the number of requests for special events in Parksville, including the community park, local streets and parks. I explained that we have a special events coordinator and that there's a long-standing application process, and that information was very well received by the board members. I'll add that the Chamber's golf tournament, which was expected to plan for coming up very soon, but it has been postponed. And the Chamber's AGM will be June 27th, and tickets are available for purchase now. As a liaison, I attend the start of the meetings, and then the board continues on with the meeting with the board itself. So, and subsequently, I get information after the fact. Anything? Nope. I'll carry on. The Oceanside Task Force on Homelessness. The Homelessness Partnering Strategy is a community-based program. It's aimed at preventing and reducing homelessness, and it provides direct support and funding. So this goes to things like rent subsidies and specific things where people might be at risk of becoming homelessness if they in fact lose the shelter they do have. The task force has been successful in applying for that funding in the past. And funding has been applied for, but there's no word yet, which means that there is a gap in the interim. And so there are very limited funds on hand right now from the previous grant. And that sadly does put some residents in our community at serious risk, but they're trying to put some things together in the short term, and hopefully they will hear mid-month whether or not that next application is successful. Also, co-chairs met with BC Housing, and there was some clarification around the process for getting emergency management and climate readiness funding, as well as extreme weather response shelter. There was some confusion about how that went. There was discussion about what is needed to have a budget and a plan for EMCR warming centers this winter, and also for cooling centers in the event of an extreme heat event. A budget is the first step, and work will ensue on putting this together. So planning for the winter is the priority task, but consideration for the summer is also very important right now. There's also currently working on a review of the terms of reference, code of conduct, confidentiality agreements, and this is particularly helpful right now and timely because there have been some changes with representatives to the board. So it's a good time to refresh and review that, and a strategic plan will be worked on in the fall. Any questions?
Councillor Gore.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I have two questions. First, with the rentals subsidies that you mentioned. So has your group, the task force, been able to advocate to the province or BC Housing, any provincial agencies that are involved, the need for rental subsidies in our area? And what are the demographics that you're seeing, people needing those rental subsidies? Is it mostly seniors, families? Because we know with the cost of living being so high, that we are seeing more and more working people even needing those. So are you experiencing the same in your board meetings?
Thank you for the questions. And what I'd like to do is take some of those back to the task force. But I do have some knowledge about rental subsidies, that there are rental subsidies that also go to different organizations that might be involved, and they have been pooled so that the Task Force on Homelessness, and particularly the host team, which is the Housing Outreach Support Team, has access to a number of those. But even with rent subsidies, as one can imagine, emergencies can come up, things can come up that that will mean that people might get behind on their rent. As for the demographics, I certainly know that some of the people who are at risk for homelessness at present might be single parents with children, but I don't have the whole scope laid out. But I will certainly ask that question.
Go ahead, Councillor Gore.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The second is on the cooling centers. As we know, the summer is fast approaching, and has your group identified or worked with the city to identify certain cooling center locations? And how do you plan on advertising so people are aware that cooling centers are open and what times?
I believe that, that you are anticipating some of the agenda items for the next the next task force meeting, actually. And certainly there was initial discussion about that today, but, oh, sorry, at the recent meeting, but not down to all of those specifics. But one thing I do know is that, through EMCR, for instance, which is the emergency management and climate response, that's where cooling centers fall under that. And what is needed is, first of all, a budget that's put together, whether or not there's a specific plan laid out. And if that budget is then approved at the provincial level, then when and if if and when there is an event, a task number can be assigned. And if there's someone there who's then looking after it, and then that guarantees that that payment will be received when the time comes. Now, a cooling center or a response to that might include more than a physical space. It might also include people in the community or outreach having water available, or perhaps, you know, just knowing where to go, or some places have misting stations and different things. So I think all of those things are dependent, of course, on what the weather brings and who and how many are in need of some extra supports in that area. So all those specifics haven't been worked out, but the first step is actually for any organization working on this to put together a budget. And those, there you go. So, and that's exactly what's in there, that the budget is the first step, and they're working on putting this together for both winter and for summer.
Thank you. And for clarification, Councilor Gorey, your question was actually, you know, what the task force is working with the city. To recognize that the task force is an Oceanside initiative, so it is not just with the city. Parksville type of thing is with all the players within that Oceanside organization to consider locations where that might be suitable. Thank you. And carry on.
And rest assured that there are representatives from both the RDN as well as the town of Qualicum Beach in attendance at the task force meetings, as well as our local MLA. All right, moving on to the Arts Council. And I'm sure that the Arts Council will appreciate that the approval earlier in the meeting for the variance approval. Anyway, the variance approval to allow the next step towards putting in a greenhouse. The addition of a greenhouse in the art garden will allow not only for the growing of plants, including fruit trees or in the garden, but also it's planned to provide a teaching space for artists and the programs for children. So this summer and coming up soon, I believe, the Creative Kids at the MAC classes will be taking place, and there's also an art camp. And some of these I think can be individual, and some you could sign up for a whole period of time. And the garden also, if you can, go and check it out. The garden also has now the addition of a very large sculpture on site. So that's a welcome addition, and you don't need to water it at all. There are 3 galleries, of course, in place. They all have exhibits, and there's going to be a special art exhibit coming later in the summer with a focus on wetlands, and that's worth checking out. Also, the Aging Artfully, which has been a long-standing program offered in various care homes, assisted living facilities, as well as on site. They have wrapped up now, and ongoing as well. And these are outside of the MAC. The Arts Council has been working with the students at Pass Woodwinds on a mosaic project, which will be installed in the school. All right. Yes.
Thank you, Councilor Beal, for that. I'd just like to comment for those in the public that aren't aware of, that the MAC Art Gallery, McMillan on 133 McMillan, is also the box office for the ticket sales for the various groups and so forth, musicians that are appearing in the park this season coming up. So the MAC will very happily consider your request for tickets. They're going fast for the various ones. I understand when I was there last week, I had to wait in line, but there's various people that hadn't said that they didn't realize that the MAC was actually the point to purchase the tickets for. So I'm just putting a heads up out there for the MAC anyways, to let you know that anything for the Performing Arts Theater out in the community park this year, tickets are available at the MAC, and they have all the necessary purchase arrangements, plastic, cash, whatever. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for adding that. Anyone who wants Rock the Park or Trooper or the Symphony, and they also have other programs there, such as Tales for the Telling and musical events there. So thank you. I'll move on to the Advisory Design Panel. I'd just like to mention that the panel met in April to review the proposal for 285 Despard Avenue. And just generally, the panel provides feedback on overall design, exterior finishings, and landscape features and plantings. So that sort of thing. So that was the recent meeting. And finally, École Secondaire Bolinas Secondary School. Student Voice is a group, it has students actively participating in decision-making at school on things which shape their educational experience. And the group at Bolinas has been working on a few projects recently, including the school Wi-Fi upgrades, change room renovation, and start time feedback, and more. And much of this is taken into consideration for a change room remodel, which they are hoping will take place over the summer. And the Echo Club was they've just done a number of events. They were a very active participant in recent Earth Day activities and also the Brant Wildlife Festival. They were involved with tree planting along Grandin Creek in Qualicum Beach, and they attended the Mid-Island Youth Climate Symposium, which was organized and hosted by Qualicum Secondary School. And they also planned lessons for Bolinas grade 8 and 9 students for Earth Day.
Thank you, Councillor Beale. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to touch on UBCM Advocacy Days, which was last week in Victoria. I was privileged in November, to be in Ottawa for the FCM Advocacy Days. So this year I get to compare local governments advocating at the federal level, and then just last week at the provincial level. The provincial level, we had quite a warm welcome from a variety of parties, all the parties in Victoria. Our main ask was infrastructure funding from the province. We see Osoyoos going for a 38% property tax increase this year because of infrastructure costs. We see Metro Vancouver with a water treatment plant at $4 billion, which was initially estimated at $750 million. So there are significant infrastructure costs that local governments are seeing, especially when they're being asked to build a significant number of housing units for people. One estimate suggests $24 billion of core infrastructure will need to be replaced in the next 10 years. And so what the executive UBCM members were reiterating is the need for long-term stable funding to support sustainable service delivery in BC communities. So that's what I was down in Victoria doing last week. And so I just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Well done. Thank you for your advocacy. Sorry. Yeah, you got an audience clapping, or is that a hailstorm?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Gore, yes.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Wood, for taking this on and your work at the UBCM. I was wondering what kind of response you got from the ruling party, other than we'll think about it.
Sure. So, after people would come out from their meetings, I would ask them, so how did it go? Did you get it? So this is my first time serving at UBCM, and we have an amazing president in Trish Mandewo. The trick with advocacy is to respectfully advocate for your needs, regardless of the party. And what I have seen is that UBCM has quite a strong voice with the provincial government. Of course, they didn't commit to any funding right now, but the pressure is on. They understand that that's what our ask is. They understand that they're asking us to build lots of housing, and with housing comes infrastructure and one-off grants. While we appreciate the province cutting a check for us for, say, $4.7 million, we need long-term stable funding in order to be able to commit that funds, in order for our Director of Finance to be able to plan out the long-term planning that good communities need. So there wasn't anything that came out immediately from those meetings, but I'm encouraged the more I work with UBCM to see that it's a voice that is treated with some seriousness with the province. And I think it's a really strong voice for all our municipalities, regardless of party, regardless of who's in power in Victoria. Yeah. Thanks.
Are you good with that? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to bring forward this. Councillor Gower made an amazing presentation and resolution for Mabry at AVICC. And so I think it needs to be, I don't know if you want me to read the resolution or the outcome of it. I can read it if you like, or I can just, it can be noted. The resolution went unanimously to UBCM, and what it is to protect the biosphere in our region, and there's only 19 in Canada, and I don't think people really understand what Mabry is, so I thought it was wise to share this. Would you like me to read the resolution? Because I can read it again. We had it at our
It's not really necessary this
Okay,
time. Yeah, we
okay, it'll
already
be
approved it
recorded.
at
Yes.
the
Okay,
yes.
and what it is for us to understand, and it was very appropriate and for Councillor Gower to do this. And so it will go to UBCM, and people are getting to know what Mabry is. And that's my point, because we don't, it's in the classroom now here in Parksville, and it's being presented more in our region as it should be. So my other report is the museum.
Sorry if
Sorry.
I could.
Any questions?
Yes, I was just going to ask a question on Mabry. Has there been any reports Mabry actually handled the Brand Festival this year? Have they done any reports on how successful they were, and any learning lessons come from that, or how was their attendance and so forth?
Yeah, I was out to one gathering up at the memorial, and there was about 50 or 60 people there. I haven't heard a report yet. We haven't had a meeting yet because we get them only quarterly.
Okay.
We'll have it June 9th, I think is the next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so I will report on what the
Well,
Brand
we'll-
Festival, because that is the first time they've taken it over. You
Yes,
know,
I know.
yeah.
We'll look forward to that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Now on the museum, Parksville Museum, they're now open. They're closed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, but they're open 5 days a week. Also, what was significant is that there's been a pool of water, and this is where the city came in, because it is city land, and this is exactly what we were talking about today. There's been a pool of water there that collects there forever. And it's been cleaned up by the staff here, Parksville city staff, and the shoulder was fixed. And so I believe it's much appreciated. The water was right in front of the church stairs. And so if you had a wedding there, you'd land in the water if it was raining. So that wasn't very nice. And I appreciated the quick, before it was opened, to get it done. And it looks very nice. So I thought I'd thank the city staff and our CAO for putting it in order before the season started. So those are the two things that I'd like to share right now. Thank you.
Thank you. And some fans outside that were watching intently, Councillor Martin, so they heard your voice and they came and listened. Couple young people. Anyways, I thought they're going to come in. Thank you for that, Councillor Martin. Any other reports at this time that were not identified earlier? Okay, thank you. Council, I would like to ask for a mover and a seconder for the recommendation under special business to pursuant to section 90E of the community charter. Council proceed to a closed meeting to consider items relating to the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements. Need a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Gore, seconded by Councillor Wood. All those in favor? Carries unanimous. Thank you. Let's reconvene at 2:55.